Understanding big data, it describes extensive growth of ability and use of information. The V's of big data are volume, verity, velocity. Big data has no value without big analytics. Big data is a massive amounts of data that comes from everywhere. This is the key drivers to big data analytics. As you see, it starts with a clear business need. It'll go all the way down to alignment between the business and the IT strategy, a strong data and framework, and the right analytic tools. Problems with big data is that it gathers data on people and company itself. One issue of this term is called big data is the amount of information that is gathered on people and companies itself. Examples are retail stores, grocery stores, and investigating agencies. All of these places are gathering information about us and putting all of this information in a centralized place where they can go back through it. These companies are tracking your every move within the store from each part of it and what you actually buy.
So some examples of people that or companies that use big data would be Amazon. They gather all information from the purchases, like where your location is, what you buy, and they just want to improve customer service by taking this big data and analyzing it. Starbucks, they use it to determine which locations will be successful, which is why you can have a Starbucks in one corner and then go 2 blocks and there's another one, because they take enough big data before opening a store to determine if that location will be successful and where another location needs to be. General Electric, they use big data to improve their efficiency, which is a kind of a different way to look at big data. They just look at their workers and all of their equipment and then figure out how they can improve.
All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about what big data is, and so now we're going to drill down into a couple of examples. So obviously, I think most of us have heard about the example of Target and sending coupons to the girl who was pregnant, her dad finding that out before she actually told him. So this kind of brings up the point of, is this typical of what we should expect from big data, or is this a bad example, that's an outlier of how companies actually use big data? And so obviously with Silicon Valley and all these startup tech companies, we would assume that big data is going to be very prevalent. That's very true. And so the big example of this is Netflix. So Netflix uses given information about your viewing history to recommend different shows. Or the one thing that they'll do is, based upon my viewing history and someone else's viewing history, if we both like the same show, they'll show us a different trailer for that new season, for that new episode, because our viewing history is different. And so in this case, it's really helpful for users because it's already taking our given information. It's not accessing any other private information about ourselves. It's just already given, and it makes our life better by recommending the things we wouldn't think about or wouldn't otherwise see. So it just asks the question, is this par for the course of how companies actually use big data? So then the next example is Red Roof Inn. And so what they did between 2013 and 2014, when there's a lot of really bad weather, specifically around airports, is they compiled a bunch of data from the National Weather Service and other places like that, free publicly available information. And so what they began to do is build algorithms to determine how many flights were going to be canceled on a given day. And then those flights canceled means customers and passengers are stranded in the airport, so they need some place to stay. And so they began taking all that information into a targeted mobile campaign. So ads will show up on your phone based on an algorithm and say, hey, if you need a place to stay since your flight got canceled, Red Roof Inn has great rates. We're really close to the airport, so you can call a cab and take it there. But increased revenue by about 10% of all their locations that were close to airports. But what they did is they took public information that was already out there, but then they combined that with paying for third-party data about mobile user trends and other things like that. So it just begs the question, what like where do we draw the line?
23andMe, they're ethics of big data. They're a biotech company that is actually named after the 23 pairs of chromosomes that are made up in every single individual, and it pretty much just gives you a genetic makeup that tells you pretty much who you are and it welcomes to you, but little do you know, it also brings it to third parties. And third-party sharing, we will not sell, lend, or rent your individual level information to any third party without your consent. They did the math on this, and they did the statistics and percentages, and about 85% to 90% of individuals that use 23andMe give their consent that now 23andMe can use their data and allows them to now give it to other individuals and really just have this huge warehouse of all this information of individuals. More on it is pretty much now if parents decide to do it for their children, it's up to the parents to give that consent to the children, for the company, to the company for the children, and that's kind of a big deal because now the kids are growing up not even knowing that some company already has all of their DNA and all these diseases and history that they might have later on in life. Law enforcement requests is also a big thing. They pretty much say we won't give it over unauthorized from access for law enforcement. However, under certain circumstances, your information may be subject to disclosure to judicial or other government subpoenas, warrant, or order. So it's pretty much saying if the government wants the information, they may have to give it over. So you have to be careful that if your DNA is with this company, the government might be able to get a hold of it. And then the last thing they say is insurance company employer requests. So they're trying to say right now that your DNA won't be given over to insurance companies and that they will keep it completely from them because insurance companies base your price and your rates based entirely on the likelihood of you being in an injury or possibly dying. This reminds me a lot of Gattaca, a movie that came out where pretty much the whole world is run entirely based on your DNA, and the quality of your DNA determines the likelihood of you getting a job being successful in life. So very relatable. And Origins is pretty much founder and CEO is Anne Wojcicki, ex-wife of Google's co-founder. And I'm pretty sure everybody knows that Google also has ethics and big data issues. And she pretty much wants it to be just like Google. I want the world's data on my laptop to feel the same way about healthcare. I want the world's data accessible. So kind of going off Larry Page. And they just made a deal with Genentech, a total of $60 million, so that Genentech can now look into Parkinson's disease. So now they can look into it because 23andMe is collecting all this data and they can further their studies into genes of individuals.
Alright, so next we're going to talk about Spotify. In 2015, they had a privacy update that came out that caused quite a few issues once people realized what they were actually agreeing to. So Spotify is a music streaming company, as most people know, but they were asking for access to different things that really most people would think don't have a lot to do with music. They were asking for access to your photos, your media, your files, your GPS location, your sensor data like your gyroscope in your phone, and all your contacts, all off your phone. Then they go on to suggest that you get permission because in some areas you have to have permission by local law for your contacts information to be given out to companies like this. It is supposedly optional, an opt-in kind of deal. The big concern is that they want to share your data. They came out and said they want to pass the data on to advertisers, music rights holders, mobile networks, and other business partners, is what they said. They saw a lot of backlash from this by their users once someone figured out, hey, this is what we're actually agreeing to the point that the CEO had to release an apology. The issue with this is that most users will just hit accept, like 23andMe. They accept whatever terms, and most people don't realize what they're actually agreeing to. It is an opt-in situation versus an opt-out, but most people don't realize that they're opting in.
In conclusion, big data can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing depending on how it's used. You take the General Electric, they're using it for a good reason to improve their efficiency, but then you take somewhere like Target, or that's kind of questionable, or even Spotify, where they're kind of gathering all your data with your knowledge, but kind of without your knowledge. So we just have to be careful of how we let businesses use